Thank you all very much for joining me. And I want to discuss today the extraordinary election that took place in Michigan yesterday. And let me begin by congratulating Will Lawrence, Donovan McKinney for their great congressional victories, and of course, Dr. Abdul El-Sayed for his victory in the Democratic Senate primary. Last night, in my view, in the so-called purple state of Michigan, a tectonic shift took place in American politics. That's what I believe. With an historic voter turnout, the largest voter turnout in Michigan primary history, the people of that state stood up to an unprecedented onslaught of billionaire money, close to $70 million in ads coming from super PACs like AIPAC and others. And despite that onslaught of money, they voted for a progressive candidate who has the guts to take on the oligarchs and fight for working people and for a sane and moral foreign policy. And let's be clear, what we saw in Michigan yesterday is absolutely consistent with what we have seen in election after election, in state after state, all across the country. We've seen it in Arizona, in New York, in New Jersey, in Ohio, Pennsylvania, California, Montana, Colorado, and elsewhere. The people of America want change. They want real change. They understand that status quo politics and status quo policies do not work for them, just for the billionaire class. And what the American people are saying from coast to coast is we want a government that represents all of us, not just the 1%. And let's also be very clear. The American people are sick and tired of Trumpism. There is a reason why his poll numbers are going down and down and down. Because they are disgusted with his authoritarianism, his contempt for the Constitution, his lies, his corruption, his narcissism, and his terrible and illegal wars. War in Iran, killing thousands of people, including 18 U.S. servicemen, massive economic turmoil all over the world. But here's the main point that I want to make today. As we go forward as progressives, it is not good enough to just be anti-Trump. Yeah, we got to lead the effort against this most dangerous president, but we have got to do more than that. We need a Democratic Party which is driven by grassroots activism, by working people, by young people, by people of color, and not a party dominated, as is the case now, by a small number of wealthy campaign contributors and their consultants. So what you're seeing now all over the country, really, in a very profound historical way, is a transformation of the Democratic Party from a top-down party to a party where ordinary people are making the decisions, selecting the candidates they want to represent them. So what does all of this mean for the immediate future? It means that we've got to do everything that we can to make sure that Democrats gain control over the House and the Senate in this November's election. We got to put a check on Trumpism. But it is not good enough to just check Trumpism. We need an agenda that represents the needs of a struggling working class and that will improve the lives of ordinary Americans. So what does that mean? Let's be very specific about it. Anybody out there think that our healthcare system is working? Nobody does. Everybody knows it's broken. Everybody knows it's wildly expensive. It's dysfunctional. Well, you know what we have got to do as progressives? When Democrats gain control of the House and Senate, we've got to demand that at the very top of that agenda is the reality that we are going to pass Medicare for all and guarantee health care to every man, woman, and child in this country. That's what we've got to do. But we've got to do more than that. at a time when we have more income and wealth inequality than we've ever had in the history of this country. I hope you all know this. You know, we all studied the Gilded Age. Remember that one in high school and in college? Rockefeller and Carnegie and Jay Gould and all those zillionaires, you know? What you got right now is far more unequal and extreme than existed during the Gilded Age. So what do? We got to tackle that income and wealth inequality, the power that the 1% have, by demanding, among other things, that billionaires and large corporations start paying their fair share of taxes. We're the richest country in the history of the world, but that doesn't mean anything if you got one guy, Mr. Musk, who owns more wealth than the bottom half of American households. All right? And then when we go forward and we pass legislation, we got to understand there are millions of people out there, maybe you, working for starvation wages. So what we've got to do is raise the federal minimum wage to a living wage, at least $20 an hour, maybe higher, and make it easier for workers to join unions. You want to join a union? You have the constitutional right, and your boss can't stop you. What else do we have to do? Well, just among other things, we got to end endless wars, you know? Never forget, please, that when I was a kid, the struggle was against the Vietnam War, which killed 59,000 Americans in the war, and more when they came back home, sleeping out on the streets of this country. All right? That war was based on a lie. Based on a lie. The war in Iraq, which I voted against when I was in Congress, based on a lie. The war in Iran, that Iran is going to have a nuclear weapon tomorrow and they're going to attack the United States, based on a lie. So we've got to stop endless wars. We have to stop excessive military spending, and we have to stop funding the extremist government of Israel, which has committed genocidal actions against the Palestinian people. We've got to stop that. We're going to start investing in our people, in housing, in education, in healthcare. What else does it mean? It means that we need an agenda which creates millions of good-paying union jobs by transforming our energy system away from fossil fuel. I don't have to explain to anybody. You're all reading about it, the heat waves existing in Europe, here in the United States, the drought, the forest fires. Guess what? The media may not talk about it. That's called climate change. And that's exactly what the climate scientists have been telling us is going to be happening. I want this country, and I think you want this country, not to do what Trump does, which is think that climate change is a hoax while the oil companies make billions. We want to lead the world in transforming our energy system away from fossil fuel into energy efficiencies and sustainable energy. We need to build millions of units of affordable housing so the 20 million households in this country are not spending half of their limited incomes on housing. We need to make sure that our young people, young couples, can own a home when they are young and not when they're middle-aged, which is the case right now. We need to create universal and free childcare. And we need to have public colleges and universities that are tuition free. Can we do that? Of course we can do that. We're the richest country in the history of the world. But what we need to do is tell the billionaire class they can't have it all. And there's another issue out there that Democrats are going to have to address when they gain power in the House and the Senate. That is artificial intelligence, AI, and robotics. And that is a huge issue, which I don't have the time to get into at great length right now. But bottom line here is that this is the most transformational technology in the history of humanity. It can impact everybody in every way that you can imagine. And right now, those technologies, robotics, AI, are being pushed by the wealthiest people in the country, the Musk, Zuckerberg, Bezos, Ellison, these very, very wealthy guys. And let me tell you what you already know. They're not staying up nights worrying about you. They're pushing these technologies because they want to become even richer and more powerful. But we got to say, sorry, ain't the way it's going to be. We will determine how AI and robotics unfold. And it's going to unfold to benefit human beings, not just make the big tech oligarchs even richer. And last point that I would make is that unless we get a handle on this money and politics business, there's not much that we're going to be able to do. Mr. Musk, the wealthiest guy on earth, spent $270 million to elect Donald Trump. Other Republican billionaires put an enormous amount of money. There were billionaires in the Democratic Party, not quite as many as in the Republican Party. They also influence campaigns in a very significant way. So we have got to get super PACs out of the political process. We've got to end Citizens United. We've got to move to public funding of elections. My dream, and I think your dream, is creating a vibrant democracy. One person, one vote. We debate issues, not where you have billionaires or super PACs like AIPAC flooding the airways with lying ads. So there is a lot on the table right now. But let me conclude by giving you some very good news and thank many of you for what you're doing in a very difficult moment in modern American history, maybe the most difficult that we've ever seen. Progressives are winning from one end of this country. The views that we hold, the future that we want to see for this country is, I think, being accepted and embraced by more and more Americans. So we're making progress. Yesterday was an extraordinary victory for us with Abdul's win, with Donovan's win, with Will's win in Michigan. It's on, by the way, to Minnesota next week, where a very strong and good progressive candidate, Peggy Flanagan, is running for the U.S. Senate. So let's do what we can to get her elected. But thank you all very much for what you're doing. Let's go forward together. Thank you.